It had been a long, draining Thursday afternoon. I was wrapping up my lecture on economic theories, something I'd taught 100 times over, yet it still left me tired as hell by the end. As the students filed out of the room, shuffling around in their usual half-interested haze, I started packing up my notes, ready to head home for a quiet evening. At least that's what I told myself. But then, out of nowhere, I heard a voice. "Louise." I froze, feeling an odd shiver run through me. I looked up from my papers, and there she was, leaning against the doorframe, her arms crossed. Amelia Hartley, one of my students. I'd noticed her before, but I didn't think much of it. She wasn't the typical college beauty you'd expect to catch a professor's eye. She wasn't that glamorous, but she had this quiet, rustic charm about her. She always dressed casually, denim jeans, leather boots, the kind of girl who probably belonged more to some quiet country town than this college campus. Today, though, she was wearing this soft blouse, the kind that gently hugged her figure and hinted at curves I hadn't really paid attention to before. I snapped myself out of the thought before it went too far. I'm married. I didn't want to entertain anything like that, even if she was looking at me with those sharp green eyes that seemed to know more than they should. "Professor," she said again, her voice cutting through the awkward silence between us. "Yeah," I managed to reply, feeling suddenly uncomfortable under her gaze. She wasn't saying much, just standing there, watching me as though she were deciding whether to speak or not. Her silence felt heavy, like she was waiting for me to fill it. "I saw your wife today," she said, almost casually. It was like a punch to the gut. The words hit me harder than I was expecting. My stomach twisted, and for a second, I couldn't even respond. I had no idea where this was going, but whatever it wasn't good. "Really? Where?" I tried to keep it light, to play it off as nothing, but my voice betrayed me. There was a hint of confusion in it that I couldn't hide. I hadn't even thought about where Grace might be today. She said she was running errands, and that was it. But now, with Amelia standing in front of me, that didn't feel like enough of an explanation. Amelia shifted slightly, the barest hint of a smirk tugging at her lips. "It was at the cabin by the lake," she said. "I was there this morning with my partner. We were fishing. Your wife was by the shore, sunbathing." The world seemed to pause for a moment. Grace had said nothing about going to the cabin. And even if she had, why would Amelia and her partner be there? "Why would you think it was my wife?" I asked, trying to brush off the growing tension in my chest. It wasn't like Grace to go off without telling me, especially not to the cabin. She knew how much I hated it when she disappeared for hours without saying where she was. Amelia didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked at me, those eyes of hers so damn direct, it felt like she was staring straight into me, seeing every damn thing I'd tried to hide. She gave a slight shake of her head, as if something about this whole situation was amusing to her, though I couldn't understand what. "Because I recognized your car," she said, her voice cool and almost taunting. "The vanity plate, Dr. Econ, on your Mercedes. I saw it parked outside the cabin." I froze. My car? I felt like I couldn't breathe for a second. My car had been in the shop this morning, getting an oil change. I hadn't thought to question Grace when she told me she was running errands. She was supposed to be home. There was no reason for her to be at the cabin. Not without telling me. Amelia was still standing there, her gaze unwavering, like she was daring me to argue. But I couldn't, not with the way she was looking at me. "Why would you even be at the cabin?" I asked, the question coming out harsher than I'd intended. Her eyes locked on mine, sharp and calculating. "Because I wanted to, Professor. I wanted to make sure you knew what was happening." Her lips curled into a small, almost bitter smile. "And it's not just the car that tipped me off, you know." A wave of nausea hit me. What did she know? How much had she seen? I felt a knot tighten in my chest. Amelia had always been this quiet, observant student, but now she was making it clear she wasn't just some innocent bystander in my life. There was something far darker to her presence. I could feel it. She knew something, and that knowledge, whatever it was more dangerous than I could have ever imagined. But she wasn't finished. She took a small step closer to me, her eyes never leaving mine. The air between us grew thicker, and I could smell the faint scent of lavender on her, something light and sweet that made the moment feel even more suffocating. You thought you could get away with it, didn't you? She whispered, her voice now soft, but every word felt like it was digging into me. You thought Grace would never find out. I didn't know how to respond. My mind was spinning, racing to put all the pieces together, but the weight of her words kept knocking me off course. What was she talking about? What had I done? I opened my mouth, trying to form words, but all that came out was silence. Amelia's smile deepened, her eyes flicking toward the door like she was about to leave, but instead, she just lingered for a moment longer. Then, with a final look at me, she turned and walked out without another word. And that was when I knew I was in trouble. I spent the next few days in a haze, trying to get through my classes, my lectures, the routine that used to make me feel like I was in control of my life. But it was all just a blur now. Amelia's words kept echoing in my mind, like a broken record I couldn't turn off. You thought Grace would never find out. It wasn't like Grace to hide things from me. Sure, there were little white lies here and there. Every marriage has them, right? But this felt different. There was something off. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it than just Amelia popping up with some random accusation. Amelia didn't show up to class the next few days, and it made me uneasy. I wasn't sure if I was relieved or worried. Was she pulling back to let me stew, or was she out there making plans to bring the whole thing down on me? It wasn't until the following Wednesday when I got home that I felt my stomach drop. I came through the door, expecting the usual Grace in the kitchen, maybe her glasses on the counter with a pile of papers she was working through. She always had something going, whether it was her freelance editing work or some side project. But today, the house was quiet. Too quiet. Grace? I called, a little more forcefully this time, like maybe I'd somehow missed her. No answer. My chest tightened. Where was she? I wandered through the house, checking the rooms, calling out again. Still nothing. It was weird. She never left without telling me where she was going, even if it was just to the store. And it was strange that I hadn't heard from her all day, especially since I hadn't gotten the usual texts. Finally, I went into the kitchen, figuring maybe she was just caught up with something. That's when I saw the envelope on the counter. My pulse skipped. I knew, even before I picked it up, that it was from Amelia. There was something in the air about it, something that told me this wasn't just a note. This was the beginning of whatever hell she was planning to drag me through. I opened it slowly, as if maybe the words inside would somehow change if I gave them enough time. But no. The message was simple. Direct. A few cryptic lines that made my blood run cold. Everything you've done has consequences, Professor. That was it. No signature. Just those damn words that sent a chill straight through me. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. The kind of punch that makes you dizzy, like you can't get your bearings. I looked around, half expecting Grace to suddenly walk in, laughing at the joke she and Amelia had pulled on me. But no. There was no laughter, no apology, just silence. The realization hit me all at once. Amelia wasn't just toying with me anymore. She had something on me, something I hadn't seen coming. I couldn't put my finger on what it was, but that note, those words, made me feel like the ground had just been ripped out from under me. Had Grace already found out? Was this her way of giving me a warning? Or was Amelia playing a deeper game, waiting for me to crack? I walked around the house, trying to make sense of it, but nothing seemed real. I wanted to scream, to shout at someone, but I didn't even know where to direct that anger. At Amelia? At Grace? At myself? But deep down, I knew the truth. Whatever Amelia had on me, it wasn't going to stay quiet for long. She'd made that clear enough. The worst part was, I didn't even know what she had. All I knew was, it wasn't good. The next few days felt like I was living in a fog. I couldn't focus, couldn't think straight. Everywhere I went, I felt like I was being watched. It was like the walls were closing in around me. Amelia didn't show up to class for the rest of the week. I half expected her to just drop some huge bomb, to send me a message or show up in person with something to destroy my life. But nothing. It was the waiting game. The worst kind of torture, because you never knew when the hammer was going to fall. Was she going to tell Grace everything? Or was she going to wait for the perfect moment to ruin me? I called Grace that night, but she didn't pick up. I left a message, telling her I was worried, that we needed to talk. But she didn't call back. It didn't take long before the sinking feeling in my gut turned to panic. I knew something wasn't right. But what the hell could I do? By the time Friday rolled around, I barely slept, my nerves frayed. I was starting to doubt myself. Was I losing my mind? Was I overthinking everything? Or was something really going on? When I walked into the house that evening, I found Grace sitting on the couch, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. There was something in her posture, something guarded about her. She didn't even look up when I walked in. "Grace?" I asked, my voice coming out more softly than I meant. She didn't answer at first, just stared straight ahead, her lips pressed tight together. Then, finally, she looked up at me. Her eyes were red, like she'd been crying. "Damn it. What's wrong?" I asked, my heart racing. "I need to talk to you," she said quietly, her voice trembling slightly. I had never heard her like that. Grace was the strong one. She always held things together. But now she looked like she was about to fall apart. I sat down across from her, trying to keep my breathing steady. The pit in my stomach grew deeper. And then, without any warning, she spoke. "I know about the cabin, Theodore." That was all she said. And my world, the one I thought was solid and predictable, started to crack wide open. I could barely breathe, let alone answer her. I had no idea what to say. It felt like my insides were being pulled apart. How do you know about that?" I finally managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. Grace's eyes hardened. "I know everything. About you. About Amelia. And about what's been happening." It was like someone had just thrown me into freezing water. I didn't know where to start. I felt the world tilt beneath me. My breath hitched in my chest, and for a moment, everything around me seemed to blur, like I was in some strange dream I couldn't wake up from. Grace knew. She knew. I was suddenly hyper-aware of the space between us. The way she was sitting so far from me, like there was an invisible wall I couldn't see, but could feel with every inch of my skin. How long had she known? How much had she figured out? And more importantly, how much of it was true? I opened my mouth, but the words felt like they were stuck, like they were too heavy to come out. I had been trying to keep everything under wraps, pretending like I could control it, like I could still hold on to the life we had before. But I couldn't. Not anymore. "Grace," I said, my voice faltering. I had no idea where to start, how to fix this. "I swear I didn't." But she cut me off, her voice sharp, her eyes not even a little bit soft. "Don't. Just don't." She shook her head, like she was trying to make sense of something that just didn't make sense anymore. "I saw the videos, Theodore. The videos." My chest tightened as soon as she said it, and it felt like the floor dropped out from under me again. "What videos?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. I could feel the heat rush to my face. Amelia. She'd done this. She'd recorded it all. She had everything, didn't she? Grace didn't flinch. Didn't hesitate. The ones from the cabin. I don't know how, but I saw them. She let out a bitter laugh, the kind that stung. "You think I'm stupid? You thought I wouldn't figure it out?" I stared at her, completely lost for words. She knew about the affair, about everything. The cabin. The car. Amelia. She knew what I hadn't even realized was happening until it was too late. The guilt hit me like a wave, crashing over me, and it was suffocating. I wanted to apologize, to explain myself, to make it right. But I couldn't. How could I? How could I explain away the fact that I'd been so stupid? That I had let myself get tangled up in whatever this was with Amelia, and somehow convinced myself that Grace would never find out? I reached for her hand instinctively, but she pulled away, her eyes cold. "Don't. Just don't touch me." Her words were like ice, and they stung. I felt myself shrink back, like a kid caught doing something wrong. I didn't deserve her touch. Not after everything. "How long, Theodore?" she asked, her voice trembling now, but with anger, not sadness. "How long have you been sleeping with her?" I swallowed hard, my throat dry. The truth was, it wasn't like that. Not exactly. But who the hell was I kidding? It didn't matter how I tried to spin it. I'd betrayed her. I'd betrayed my wife. There was no excuse for it. It wasn't, I tried to start, but the words wouldn't come. There was no way to explain this and make it sound any less like what it was. Grace stood up suddenly, shaking her head. She was pacing now, the anger in her eyes burning so hot I thought it might burn the room down. You think this is some kind of joke? You think this is funny? Her voice cracked, and I could see the tears welling up in her eyes, though she wouldn't let them fall. I never thought you'd do this, Theodore. Never thought you'd betray me like this. I trusted you. The pain in her voice hit me harder than any punch. I'd screwed up. Badly. I don't know what to say, I muttered, my voice barely audible. I don't even know how we got here. I didn't. You didn't what? Grace cut me off. You didn't mean for it to happen? That's the line you're going with? I get it. I really do. You got too comfortable. Thought you could get away with it. Thought I'd never find out. But guess what, Theodore? I did. Her words were like daggers, and I couldn't even fight back. I deserved this. I deserved everything she was throwing at me right now. She stopped pacing and turned to face me, her voice steady but full of venom. You think Amelia just showed up, and suddenly, everything went to hell? You think this was just some little mistake that happened? This wasn't just an accident. You wanted it. You wanted to feel wanted again. And you let her pull you in. Well, now you're gonna feel the consequences, Theodore. Because I am done. The weight of her words crashed over me like a tidal wave. Done. The finality in her tone, the certainty in her eyes. It hit me harder than anything Amelia could ever do. Grace was done with me. I stood up, wanting to grab her, wanting to hold her, but I knew better. I knew that nothing I did now would fix what had been broken. Grace, please. I started, but she wasn't having any of it. No. No more excuses. No more lies. She turned her back on me, walking toward the door. I've had enough. I stood there in the silence, my heart pounding in my chest. I wanted to scream, to beg, to fix it somehow, but I knew it was too late. I'd pushed her away, and now, there was no coming back from it. Before she left, she looked back at me once, her eyes filled with a kind of sadness I couldn't quite place. You made your choice, Theodore. Now you're gonna have to live with it. And then she was gone. I stood there, rooted to the spot, unable to move, my mind spinning. This wasn't just about an affair anymore. It wasn't just about what had happened between me and Amelia. This was the end of everything I had worked for. My marriage. My life. It was all slipping through my fingers. I had no idea what to do next. And then, as if it couldn't get worse, my phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. The text read, "It's time." I didn't need to wonder who it was. I knew exactly who had sent it. Amelia. And that's when I knew for sure. This wasn't over. It had only just begun. The room felt like it was closing in on me. I stared at the phone in my hand, the words from the text still staring back at me. It's time. Amelia. The name alone twisted something in my gut. She had warned me. No, she had promised. She'd said I would pay the price for what I'd done, and now, here I was, a wreck of a man who had just lost his wife. My chest felt tight. I didn't know what to do, where to turn. I wanted to fix things. I wanted to make it right, but I knew it wasn't possible anymore. Not with Grace. Not with the way things had gone down. And now, Amelia was about to make sure I felt every bit of the pain I had caused. I paced back and forth, my mind a whirl of thoughts that didn't connect, didn't make sense. The panic rising in me felt like a cold, suffocating wave. I grabbed my coat and headed out of the house, barely remembering to lock the door behind me. I needed answers. I needed to figure out what Amelia was planning. I drove, but I didn't know where. The streets were empty, the world quiet around me, and all I could hear was the roar of my own thoughts. I should have called Grace back. I should have begged her to come home. But I knew, it was too late. I pulled up in front of the university. I wasn't sure why I ended up here. I just knew I needed to face this head-on. I wasn't going to let Amelia pull the strings from the shadows anymore. The building loomed in front of me, its cold, concrete walls casting long shadows under the streetlights. I parked and got out, my breath fogging in the chill of the night air. As I walked toward the lecture hall, I saw her. Amelia. She was leaning against the doorframe again, just like the first time I'd seen her in the lecture hall. But this time, there was nothing casual about her. She was dressed in black, dark jeans, a jacket, and she looked different, cold, calculating. She didn't smile when she saw me. She didn't need to. The way she stood there, her eyes locking onto mine, told me everything I needed to know. "You came," she said, her voice quiet, like she was speaking to someone who had already lost. "What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice strained. There was no point in pretending I wasn't terrified. There was no point in pretending I had any control over this situation. Amelia had me right where she wanted me. She tilted her head slightly, like she was sizing me up. "What I want, Theodore, is for you to feel what I felt. To understand what it's like to have everything you thought was solid fall apart. To have someone you trusted turn on you." Her lips twisted into something that could have been a smile, but it wasn't. I swallowed hard, trying to steady myself. "You've already done that. You've already taken everything from me." "Not everything," she replied smoothly. "You still have one thing left to lose." The words hung in the air, and I felt my stomach drop. "What the hell are you talking about?" Her eyes gleamed with something dark. "Grace. You still think she's going to forgive you, don't you? You think if you beg enough, if you cry enough, she'll take you back. But you don't understand, do you, Theodore? She's already made her decision. You're nothing but a reminder of everything she's lost." I felt like I'd been slapped. The words hit harder than anything she could have done physically. Grace was gone. She wasn't coming back. And somehow, I had known that deep down, even before Amelia said it out loud. "You think this is over?" Amelia continued, stepping closer, her voice almost a whisper now. "No, Theodore. This is just the beginning." I stepped back, my hands clenched at my sides. "What do you want from me?" Amelia didn't answer immediately. She simply stepped forward and handed me a small flash drive. It was a simple, nondescript piece of technology, but I knew what was on it. The video. I felt my blood run cold as she placed it in my palm. "You know what to do with this," she said, her voice as cold as ice. "I've been recording everything. Every conversation. Every moment. And now, I'm going to make sure everyone else knows exactly what you did." I looked at the flash drive in my hand, the weight of it sinking into my skin. It felt like it was burning me. "This doesn't have to go any further," I said, my voice shaky. "Please. I'll do anything. Just don't." She cut me off. "Anything?" she asked, her smile cold and knowing. "There's nothing you can do to fix this, Theodore. There's nothing you can offer me that will make it right." I felt like the air had been sucked out of my lungs. "Then why? Why all of this?" She stepped back, her eyes never leaving mine. "Because you needed to learn. You needed to feel the weight of your actions. And if you don't, then I'll make sure you never forget it." The words landed like bricks in my chest, heavy and suffocating. I took the flash drive, feeling its cool surface against my palm, but I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know what I could possibly say to make this right. Amelia had already won. And that was the worst part. The worst part wasn't the affair. It wasn't even the loss of Grace. It was that I had let this girl, this student, destroy everything I had built. She had taken control, and now I was powerless. Amelia turned away then, without another word. She didn't need to say anything else. She'd said it all with her eyes, with the way she had maneuvered everything to this point. As she walked away, I stood there, holding the flash drive in my hand like it was the key to my damnation. I drove home in a daze, my mind reeling. The weight of everything hit me in waves, like I was drowning in it. Grace was gone. Amelia had won. And I was left holding a flash drive full of destruction, knowing there was no way out now. I didn't even know if I wanted to fight anymore. I just knew it was over. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't even think straight. The flash drive was sitting on the passenger seat, and every time I glanced at it, my stomach twisted. It was the final nail in the coffin. There was no way to deny what I'd done, no way to hide from it anymore. I pulled into the driveway, the headlights of my car casting long shadows across the yard. The house looked like it was standing there, waiting for me to come inside and face the mess I'd made. The front door was slightly ajar, like it was offering me one last chance to walk through and pretend things were normal. But nothing was normal anymore. I sat in the car for a few minutes, just staring at the door. I kept telling myself I had to talk to Grace, that maybe, just maybe, if I could explain everything, if I could beg her to understand, maybe I could fix it. But I knew it was pointless. I had already lost her. And even if I hadn't, nothing would be the same again. With a deep breath, I grabbed the flash drive and walked into the house. The silence hit me like a wall. No sound of Grace moving around. No clinking of dishes or the low hum of the TV. Just the silence that had come to define my life after everything had fallen apart. "Grace?" I called out, my voice sounding strange in the emptiness. No answer. I walked through the house, checking every room, half expecting her to be sitting in some corner, waiting for me to show up and beg her to come back. But no, she wasn't here. I went to the bedroom, the one place where we used to feel safe, where we'd shared everything, good and bad. The bed was still made, like nothing had changed. But it felt different now. The weight of what had happened hung heavy in the air. That's when I saw it. A piece of paper on the bedside table. I walked over to it slowly, feeling my heart race in my chest. It was a note from Grace. My hands were shaking as I unfolded it. "I can't do this anymore. I need space. Theodore. I don't know what the future holds for us, but right now, I can't be here. I'm sorry." I felt the blood drain from my face. She was gone. I stood there for what felt like hours, staring at the words, unable to breathe. This was it. Grace had finally made her decision, and I was the one who had pushed her to this point. I had been so consumed by my own damn selfishness, my own insecurities, that I hadn't even seen the cracks forming in our marriage until it was too late. She was done. I crumpled the note in my hand, my eyes burning. I had lost everything. I stumbled back into the living room, the flash drive still clutched in my fist. I had no idea what I was supposed to do with it. I could destroy it, sure, but that wouldn't change what had happened. It wouldn't erase the truth. I stood there for a long time, lost in thought, before I finally did the one thing that felt like the only choice I had left. I walked over to the laptop on the coffee table. I plugged the flash drive in. As soon as it connected, the folder popped up on the screen. It was labeled, "For Grace." My heart pounded in my chest. I hesitated for a moment, staring at the folder. I knew what was inside. I knew it was the proof of everything. The cabin, the affair, the lies. It was everything Amelia had been collecting, everything she had used to get her revenge on me. I had no idea how far this had gone, how deep the web she'd spun around me was. But I was already too far in. I had to see it. I clicked on the first video. It started with a grainy shot of the cabin, the one by the lake. I recognized the angle. This was a hidden camera, one I had never seen before. The footage was shaky at first, but then it steadied. Grace was there. I could see her, lounging on a chair by the water, a towel draped over her body. She was laughing, looking at something on her phone. She seemed so normal, so damn innocent. But then, the camera zoomed in, and I saw it. Another figure entered the frame. A man. I couldn't see his face at first, but I could tell by the way he walked, the way he moved, that he was familiar. My stomach turned as I recognized him. It was a guy from the university. Someone I'd worked with on a few projects in the past. I couldn't remember his name, but I remembered his face. And I knew what was coming. They started talking. Grace was smiling, laughing. She leaned in, and then before I could even process it, they were kissing. I froze. My hands went numb. The room felt like it was spinning. It wasn't just a kiss. It was an affair. It was everything I had feared, and more. I watched in a daze as they kissed again, and then the footage cut to a different angle, showing them walking down the dock toward the water, holding hands. Grace had slept with him. I felt like I was suffocating. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't focus on anything except the image of Grace, the woman I had loved for years, with someone else. She had betrayed me. The second video was worse. It was a closer shot, one that caught them under the bright summer sun, laughing and hugging, kissing again, in full view of the camera. Grace didn't even look guilty. She looked happy. Like she had no idea that her whole life was about to be exposed, ripped apart. I could feel something shift inside me. Anger, hurt, resentment. It all hit at once. Amelia had won. She had made sure I saw this. Made sure I understood exactly how much Grace had moved on, how little she thought of me now. But something else hit me too. Amelia had set this all up. She had planned this carefully, systematically. She had broken me down piece by piece. I wasn't just a victim of an affair anymore. I was the victim of Amelia's ruthless, meticulous revenge. I slammed the laptop shut, my hands trembling. I didn't want to see any more. I didn't want to feel any more. But the damage had been done. I was left standing in the dark, holding nothing but the pieces of my shattered life. The next day, I went to the university. I couldn't stay home. I couldn't face the silence, the emptiness of the house. As I walked through the halls, I saw students laughing, talking, all going about their lives, while mine was falling apart. I thought about Amelia. I thought about Grace. I thought about how much I had lost. And I knew one thing for sure. Nothing would ever be the same again. It was time to face the consequences of my actions. And this time, I wasn't going to hide from them. I couldn't breathe. The walls of the university seemed to close in around me as I walked down the hallway. It felt like everyone could see the weight I was carrying. The shame. The betrayal. My whole life felt like a house of cards, and I was waiting for the final gust of wind to bring it all crashing down. I walked into my office, hoping for a moment of silence, some shred of peace to clear my head. But the instant I stepped inside, I saw it. Another note, this time tucked under the door. I picked it up slowly, my hands trembling. Was this from Grace? I tried to calm myself, but I already knew what it would say. Meet me in the faculty lounge at 4 p.m. The note was signed only with an X. There was no name, but I knew who it was from. Amelia. My pulse raced. This was it. She was going to finish what she'd started. I knew I should have walked away. I should have gone home, faced the mess of my life head-on. But I couldn't. I couldn't stop myself from walking down that path, no matter how twisted or dangerous it was. The faculty lounge was almost empty when I arrived, the only sound the quiet hum of a coffee machine in the corner. I could smell the stale coffee lingering in the air, the faint odor of old books and worn furniture. It felt like a place for hiding, like it had seen countless broken people over the years, each of them carrying their own burdens, their own dark secrets. I stood by the door for a long time before Amelia appeared, stepping into the room with the same calm confidence she always had. She was wearing a simple black dress today, her hair pulled back into a tight ponytail, eyes sharp and calculating. Like a predator. Glad you could make it, she said, her voice casual, but there was a cold edge to it, like she was enjoying this far too much. Why the hell am I here, Amelia? I asked, my voice shaking with a mix of frustration and fear. What do you want from me? Amelia didn't answer right away. She just looked at me, her green eyes gleaming with something dark, something almost victorious. You still don't get it, do you? She said after a long pause, almost like she was savoring the moment. You think this is all about Grace, about your marriage. But it's not. This is about you. This is about you understanding what happens when you betray someone who trusts you. I clenched my fists, my anger rising. I get it, okay? I screwed up. I hurt Grace. But you've taken it too far. You've ruined everything. What do you want from me, Amelia? She stepped closer, her voice low and controlled. I want you to understand the weight of your actions. I want you to feel what I felt when I realized you were playing this game with me. I want you to feel the crushing emptiness when you realize the person you trusted the most is the one who betrayed you. I could feel my pulse quicken as she spoke, each word hitting me harder than the last. She was right. I had betrayed her trust. I had hurt her, just like I had hurt Grace. And I had done it all without even considering the consequences. But I wasn't sure anymore if I could take much more of her twisted version of justice. I looked at her, trying to steady myself. This isn't justice. This is revenge. This is you getting back at me because you're angry, because you want to hurt me. But I'm not the one who hurt you, Amelia. I never did anything to you. She tilted her head, the ghost of a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Oh, you don't think so? You think I'm just some innocent student, trying to make a name for myself, right? That's what you thought, wasn't it? That I was just some naive girl looking for attention. Her voice dropped to a whisper, and it sent a chill down my spine. I was never just some student, Theodore. I was always watching you, watching Grace. And when I saw how easily you turned your back on her, how easily you let her slip through your fingers, I knew I had to do something. I had to make sure you understood. I was silent for a moment, my mind reeling. Amelia had been playing this game for longer than I realized. She had been watching me, watching Grace. And somewhere along the way, she had twisted this whole thing into a story where I was the villain, where I was the one who had wronged her. It was sick. It was brilliant, but it was sick. Why? Why all of this? I asked, the frustration in my voice breaking through. You had the power, Amelia. You could have gone to Grace, you could have just told her the truth, but instead you manipulated everything. You made me think I had control, and now I've lost everything. What do you want from me? Amelia paused for a moment, her gaze softening ever so slightly, like she was considering something. But when she spoke again, her voice was as cold as ever. I don't want anything from you, Theodore, she said quietly. You can't give me what I need. What I want is for you to walk away from this. To walk away from Grace, from your life, and leave everything you built behind. I want you to feel how it feels to be discarded. To be nothing. The words hit harder than I could have imagined. It wasn't enough that she'd taken Grace from me. Now she wanted to take everything. My dignity, my career, my very sense of self. I felt like I was suffocating. I wanted to scream, to fight back, but I knew it was pointless. There was nothing left for me to cling to anymore. Amelia, please, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Just end this. End it now. Let me go. She looked at me for a long moment, the silence hanging heavy between us. Finally, she reached into her purse and pulled out a single envelope. I took it from her, my hands shaking. She didn't say anything else. She just turned and walked out of the room, leaving me standing there, feeling like the weight of the world was on my shoulders. I opened the envelope slowly. Inside, there was a single sheet of paper with one line written on it. You were never in control, Theodore. You never were. And with that, it hit me. Amelia wasn't just destroying me for the sake of revenge. She had been building this up for months. She had been pulling the strings all along. I had never been in control. I had been a pawn in her game from the very beginning. I walked out of the lounge, my heart heavy with realization. It was over. And I didn't even know if I had the strength to keep fighting. The day felt like it was stretching on forever, every moment dragging by like a century. I didn't know what to do anymore. Amelia's words, her plan, had been like a slow poison, seeping into every part of me. I thought I could stand up, I thought I could fight back, but I realized now, I had no fight left in me. I couldn't go back to the university. I couldn't look anyone in the face, knowing that my reputation, my entire career, was in shambles. Amelia had made sure of that. She'd already handed out copies of the video to a few colleagues, people I'd trusted, people who had respected me. And once it got out to the students, to the world, it was done. I was done. There was no coming back from this. I took the envelope with me as I left the lounge, my fingers numb around the paper inside. I had no idea where I was going. I didn't even care anymore. By the time I got home, I was exhausted. Mentally, physically, emotionally. I stood in the doorway for a long time, staring at the empty house. The silence was deafening. It wasn't just the house that was empty. It was me, too. Everything was gone. I tossed the envelope onto the coffee table and collapsed onto the couch, my mind swirling with everything I had lost. Grace. My career. My dignity. And now, it seemed like my soul too. I couldn't even bring myself to feel angry anymore. It was just numb. The house felt like a tomb. It wasn't until the next morning when the final blow came. I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing on the table. For a moment, I didn't move. I had no desire to pick it up, to face whatever new disaster was waiting for me. But the buzzing wouldn't stop, so I grabbed it, half expecting it to be some final message from Amelia, or a call from one of my colleagues to confirm the nightmare. But it wasn't. It was from Grace. The message was short, almost too brief. I could see the sadness in the few words she had written, but what hit me hardest was the final line. I've made arrangements to stay with a friend for a while. Don't try to contact me. I need space. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for. The words burned. It wasn't just the end of a relationship. It was the final curtain call. Grace was gone. She wasn't coming back. Not now. Not ever. I threw the phone onto the couch, standing up with a jolt, like I could shake off the weight of it. But there was nothing to shake off. The reality was too heavy, too overwhelming. She was gone. Later that afternoon, I found myself at the university one last time. I didn't go in, didn't even get close to the office. I just stood by the entrance, staring at the building that had been my life for so long. All of it was slipping away. It was ironic, really. I had always thought I could control everything. I'd built my life around that control. I thought I was above all the little mistakes that other people made. But now I realized it had all been an illusion. I had lost everything because I thought I was invincible. Amelia had taken that invincibility and shattered it. She had turned the very thing I prided myself on into a weapon that destroyed me. And now, standing outside that building, with no job, no wife, no future, I knew the truth. There was no such thing as control. The last few months had felt like a dream, a nightmare, actually. I had been so focused on trying to hold on to a life that was slipping through my fingers, that I didn't realize how badly I was hurting the people around me. I had hurt Grace. I had hurt Amelia. And in the end, I had only hurt myself. I walked away from the campus for the last time, the weight of my decisions pressing down on me like a lead blanket. I didn't know what came next. I didn't know if there was anything left for me. But one thing was clear. The man I was, the man I had been, no longer existed. I drove home in silence. The house still felt empty, but it was different now. It was a place I could no longer call mine. I went into the living room, the place where everything had started to unravel. The flash drive was still on the coffee table. I hadn't touched it since the last time I saw it. The evidence of my downfall. But as I stood there, staring at the drive, I knew one thing for sure. It didn't matter anymore. The destruction had been done. The damage was irreversible. I sat down on the couch, my head in my hands. For the first time, I let the tears come, not for the loss of Grace, or the job, or even for the life I had once had, but for the realization that I had become the person I hated. The person who let everything slip away because of selfishness, because of pride, because of arrogance. And now, all I could do was sit in the wreckage of my choices. In the end, I suppose there's no such thing as justice when you're the one who's wrong. There's only the price you pay for your sins. I had paid mine, and I had no idea if I would ever be able to move on. But I knew one thing. I would never forget how it felt to lose everything. And that, more than anything, was the final lesson Amelia had taught me. It was over.